Hello everyone, and welcome to Module 3, Week 4. In this video, we're going to talk about mindset, and in particular, if we can change our own mindset. So I'd like to start off with sharing a few stories with you, but before I do that, I would like to ask you a few questions. First, have you ever received a lower grade in a course than you had hoped for, but been happy with it anyways? So, the reason I ask you this question is because a lot of time we don't actually reach our goals. And the way we respond to not reaching our goals is really, really important. So, let me give you an example of when I experienced this. So, when I first started on my path of studying psychology, I was originally planning on becoming a psychiatrist. So, I was pre med and I was taking all of the classes to fulfill med school requirements. Now, obviously, I changed my mind. I did not end up going that route, but that's a story for another day, really. One of my semesters, I was taking three courses. So I was taking an advanced chemistry course, physics, and my second calculus course. And this was all while dealing with having a newborn. So my son was born the summer before this fall semester started. So it was a really hectic, crazy semester. And of course, going pre med, my goal was to get straight A's in these courses because you need those really high GPAs to get into a good school. So, of those three courses, the hardest course for me was the chemistry course. I really just didn't understand chemistry in general, and I struggled a lot. And I would study and spend hours on hours on end completing assignments, studying, going over things, preparing for classes. There were some days I would spend an entire 8 straight hours studying. And in the end of doing all that, I barely squeaked by with a B minus, which was a good grade, but it wasn't what I wanted, right? It wasn't my goal. But even though I didn't quite meet my goal of getting an A in the class, I didn't see this as a failure at the end of that semester. I worked really hard. And I know beyond a doubt that there was not anything more that I could have done. And so, even though I didn't get the grade that I wanted, and honestly, I never used chemistry again, especially once I decided not to pursue medical school. But that class still prepared me for my actual path, which was graduate school and getting into an applied behavior analysis program. So that semester and how hard I worked in that class prepared me for my grad school classes in a way that no other undergraduate class ever did. So the habits that I took from that chemistry course, the long-term habits that I got from that course, were ones I carried with me all throughout graduate school. So, the reason I'm talking about this is because as we learn about growth mindset, it's really important to understand that failures are okay, setbacks are okay. And sometimes in those instances, um, that's where you learn the most. What's most important in all of this is that you feel like you've tried your hardest and you feel like you've put everything you can out there. I think sometimes what we do is we sabotage ourselves in the sense that if we don't try our hardest or we don't put everything in and then we fail, it almost gives you an excuse, right? You can say, well, I didn't do that well because I didn't try very hard. And often, sometimes you beat yourself up for that as well. So it's really important that you put everything into it when you're going after your education and working in these classes. And really any goal you have, as long as you put everything into it, you can really be okay with the results at the end. So, as I started my own graduate program, I was very nervous. I was experiencing imposter syndrome where I just didn't feel like I belonged or I deserved to be there. And the ABA program here at Sac State is really competitive. They only take 5 to 8 students a year. And I remember thinking when I first got in, I don't know why I was picked. I don't belong here. But then I gave myself a mental shake and decided I'm going to put 110% into this. And if I don't make it or I fail, then that's okay because at least I know that I did everything that I possibly could. And that's an approach that I've taken in many things in life. And I have failed many times, and I've had lots of goals that I didn't quite meet, right? And I think the main thing is it's really important to fail and actually learn how to deal with that and think about how to correct anything that you did that may have resulted in that and try harder next time. But to think of it as an opportunity, one that shows you that you still have some learning to do and that you have to persist um, and dedicate yourself to put all the energy you can into that goal so that you can be successful down the road. So don't use failures as a determining factor. They're more of a measure of how much more learning you might have to do. I put some quotes here, and the first one is something I say a lot. Um, Usually something I say all the time to my kids, because when you're a kid, you actually do fail a lot, which can be frustrating. So I do say this to them a lot. I also say this to students who maybe come to me discouraged because something didn't quite go to plan. So I often say, if you don't try, you never fail, but you'll also never succeed, right? And just take a moment to think about that. If you haven't failed, you probably haven't pushed hard enough. And if you ever want to really succeed at something, not only will you have to try very hard, but you will also inevitably have to fail sometimes. Everybody who really thrives and tries to reach their potential and growth to their maximum ability fails at something at one point or another. And I have a lot of quotes here from different icons. You see the first one there is Albert Einstein, right? So he says, a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new, right? And I have several of these quotes for you to read on your own time and just kind of think about what it is they're saying. And I'll leave you with the last one by LeBron James that says, you have to be able to accept failure to get better. The majority of people who have really impacted the world and their lives with greatness have not been scared to fail. Now, another question I have for you, I want you to think back and think if you have ever been influenced by your teachers. Have you ever had a teacher tell you that you're good at something, or maybe even tell you that this isn't something for you? I want you to take that memory and think about what you did with it. So, I have another story for me personally. When I decided not to go to med school, I instead transferred to Sac State and started exploring my options within psychology. And I became really interested in applied behavior analysis. But something you wouldn't know about me unless you saw me in person is that I'm actually in a wheelchair. So, I have a muscle condition and I am in a wheelchair when I'm out and about. And a majority of the jobs in the field of ABA are working with individuals who have developmental disabilities, and it's hard physical work. So, this would be difficult to do if you're physically challenged in any way, like I am. But I thought, maybe there's still somewhere in the field I could go into. I just have to think outside the box. So, I went and met with a professor to see what they thought about it. And I think this professor meant well. I really think they were only trying to keep me from putting in all this hard work and then never being able to succeed. I don't think any of this was said with any malicious intent. But they did end up telling me in that meeting that with my condition, this really wasn't the field for me and I should probably find something else, which was a bummer, right? Not something that you want to hear when you finally find something you're really excited about. Now, I could have done one of two things with that opinion. So, first, I could have given up on ABA right then and there, even though I was super interested in it and I really felt like I had found my niche. I could have just said, you know what, forget it. They're right. I probably can't do this. Or I could have said, you know what, I'm going to try anyways and try really hard and take it as a challenge to break the mold and find a way for me to be successful in the field that I loved, even if it was in maybe an unconventional or out of the box way. And spoiler alert, I did do that exactly. But think about how you learn here at Sac State or any of your education, really, your elementary, junior, and high school experiences. If you've gone to community college before this or here at Sac State, what kind of classes did you choose? And how do those faculty members and those instructors and those teachers assess your learning? Are they asking you to memorize the information? And if so, is that where you set your own bar for yourself? So, at some point in your college education, it's really important for you to realize that you're doing all of this hard work and education ultimately for you, for your own self, for your own success. And if you can really change your mindset to understanding that, I think you start doing things differently. At least that's what I have found for myself. Now, like I talked about before, early in the semester, a few weeks ago, when I realized that I was paying for my own education, right, for my graduate program, I realized that what I got out of it was up to me. It wasn't up to the instructors or up to the curriculum. And when I really understood that, I started applying myself in different ways. So I took the harder classes, the ones that had the stories of an instructor really pushing you or being a hard grader. I chose to take those courses because I knew I would learn more and I would get more out of them. In fact, one of those classes I took was with Dr. Furtak, who many of you may know and may have taken classes with. She's one of the wonderful professors here at Sac State. And was she tough? Yes, she was. She's tough. Was it good, hard to get a good grade in her class? Yes, it was. But on the flip side of that, I learned so much in her class, and I became a much stronger scientific writer because of her tutelage, which later on greatly benefited me when it came time to write my master's thesis. I did not have as hard of a time writing that as some other students, and I firmly believe it was because I took her class when I had the choice because she taught me a lot about my writing and how to do it correctly. Now, as we learn information, something to keep in mind, information changes all the time. I can guarantee that the facts you learn in your classes today, at least some of them will be proven not to be true 10 years from now. And so, going back to that question of do you just memorize facts, that's not as important as actually learning how to learn and learning overall general principles. So think about a class that you've just been asked to memorize information for exams. How long did it take you to forget that information? And did you ever actually use it again? So as you start going through your education here, make it your own. Do your studying for you, learn the information for you. There is a part in your textbook that talks about being skeptical, being open to growth, being open to being wrong, and more than anything, just questioning things. As I mentioned, there are facts you will learn in college that will prove not to be true 10 years from now or longer, or even sooner. And an example of this, it used to be largely believed that you were born with the number of brain cells you have, and you never make any new ones. That was a pretty common belief amongst scientists. But now we know that there are new cells that are born and regenerated in parts of the brain. And some cells survive and some don't. But the main point is that that was a fact that many people learned and were taught that was actually wrong. Okay. So, as you go through your education, it's good to be skeptical. It's good to question why. And the more important thing to learn is how to assess what sources you're getting and how to assess how reliable they are. And I encourage you to debate. Debate your viewpoints and consider other people's viewpoints. In my lab in grad school, we would often read articles of other viewpoints that were different from those we had and the research we were conducting. And that was really important for us, especially as students, to not merely be exposed to other viewpoints, but to also force us to think through and be able to defend our own viewpoint while also investigating if there might be another viewpoint better than our own, right? A more parsimonious explanation for the research we were doing. Because as my advisor always said, and he still says to this day, that's how we move the science forward. If you adhere only to your own viewpoints forever, science can never move forward, right? So we need to debate and look at what other people have to say. It's so important. Debating is so important. It really helps you to think through any holes that might be in your own logical reasoning. And in addition to that, debating with someone else opens you to consider other viewpoints, which is so important in education. So I encourage you to challenge your own beliefs. And the last piece of advice that I will end this video on is to start thinking about how you react to adversity, to setbacks, and to failure. Do you decide that you're going to shy away from it, that you may not try, or just take a completely different path? Or do you embrace it? I really encourage you to embrace it, to think about how failure just shows you where you have more learning to do. Setbacks just show you where you need to persist a little bit more or try a little bit harder. And it is that the ability to recognize that no matter the outcome, you always have the ability to continue on, to grow, to learn, and to develop. Any ability, any new skill, any knowledge that you want, it's never too late to change your mindset. And as you went through this week's reading, you learned a lot about this idea of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. The difference between feeling like you're born with your abilities and you can't do anything about it versus the idea that you can do whatever you put your mind to. It might take a long time, it might take a lot of determination, but you can grow. You can grow your abilities and you can also grow and change your mindset. So I encourage you as you continue on your education and your future career paths that you embrace a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. I hope you all have a good week and stay well.